Well, here's video number 2. Maybe this should have been video number 1 back in the shop here, December 16th, 2020. As we're taking apart my little mechanism here. This is a revised, I've taken apart the outer plate and remounted it temporarily, some of the moving parts, so you can see sort of how it works. Basically all built on Dad's design over here, where he has this long bar runs up into here, and then there's a spring that this is attached to here, comes down and causes this bar to press against here and against tension against the geared disc that's in here. And you can see how that sort of works over here. It's basically the same idea. You've got this bar comes down, a little notch coming out, well, a little protruding segment coming out, goes into the various notched parts of this gear design that I milled out and then put into this section here. They're 1/4-20 screws, one here and one there, and then I turned them down on the lathe, and this whole thing will get refined as how that's actually done, but mechanically it holds together well, so that this flat disc is secured into here, and then that part will go into the long extension that goes, down to the rising pole coming off the stand. Anyway, back to what we're trying to accomplish here is to just sort of shrink this down so it's not as heavy and not as large. Again, I'm taking out this really clever feature that's just not going to be there. That allows the whole thing to swing 180 degrees, 360 degrees. We're just not going to have that. But you can see temporarily what I've got here. Here's that torsion spring, and the idea is that one leg here pushes against here. This is the other leg, and it's hard to keep it where it's supposed to be, but when it operates, that leg comes around and is in between here. So you've got the tension between this bar and your adjustment bar. So when you pull back on the bar, tension is against the spring. If it's operating properly, there's enough space that this thing actually comes out, and then the whole thing will swing one way or the other until you find the notch you want it in, and then the spring pushes it back in there. So it's technically working, as you saw maybe in the first video, but I want a spring that has more tension. Have not been able to find one, so I'm thinking what I'm going to do is change the spring, and I'm probably going to find one where I will drill a hole here and a hole here, and I'll put a set screw through there. The spring itself will draw these together. I think it's called a tension spring. So I should probably add a drawing of it. But basically, the spring itself will, be about 1 inch long, and on the end of it, there's a circle here, circle there, so it's bent up. So this piece will go inside here. I'll have to cut a cavity and drill a hole, and then again drill a hole here and cut a small cavity, so that this part of the spring goes inside, and then that hole will be tapped for a 632 set screw that'll hold that piece in. Same thing over here, that'll hold this in, and then so that rather than the tension coming from the spring pushing this bar in, the tension will come from a spring that is pulling this in. I think that might be a better way to go. To show you my first attempt on a spring was way over here twice. I had a compression spring. The idea, well, just put a spring that puts tension between this spot and here. So I had a 632 screw coming out with a compression spring that went over it. It actually worked. It gave me good tension, but the sound, you could hear it crunching, and as the spring slid along the screw, you could just hear that noise. I didn't like that. So that's when I went to this version, which is technically working. It's just not having enough tension, and I can't find a spring that will give me enough tension that doesn't get too big for the device. So I think my next version here hopefully will work. Like I say, put a hole here that it goes through, but I need a cavity. I'll have to mill a little cavity along here. You can see I've already got one here. These were 2 failed attempts. I actually broke my tapping into there. So there's a broken tap in one, and one that I got away with. As Dad would have said, got luckier than I should have. But then, so this tension spring will then have a circle that goes inside a cavity. Set screw goes down to hold it. Same thing over here. A hole here, and a milled out cavity there, so that this part of the spring is set inside with a set screw. All that has to be a low profile enough to fit within this 1/4 inch distance. That's the dimension I'm going for. Again, the whole idea is to shrink down everything so it's smaller and doesn't weigh as much. When I turn this into brass, that will add more weight because brass is heavier than the aluminum. But I think that might work. Anyway, so that's the latest prototype working on here, December 16th, 2020.